Okay, so the next topic is quite an interesting one because it's really about the future, not only about AI, but even about us. And we will be looking at the topic of biohacking and biotech. I say this is a particularly interesting one because I was actually watching an interview of Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who said, if I wouldn't be working at this company here, I'll probably be working at one of the biotech companies, just to show you sort of the momentum that it's going through. If we look at its development, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic and sort of an emergence of health data that has proliferated our digital space that has been collected, is now allowing new breakthroughs in areas such as, for example, DNA sequencing, digital genomics, and so on. And for this, we have prepared a fireside chat that will actually be moderated by my co-chair, Jos Dirks. So Jos, please welcome on stage together with the speaker.
Hello, everyone. This is indeed about our future, but it is, in the words of Whitney Houston, the children are our future, because we will be talking about the important role that UNICEF is playing as it relates to artificial intelligence, children, upskilling, the digital divide, and I couldn't be more thrilled, couldn't be more honored to be here with Irina Mirkina, AI lead at UNICEF, based out of Stockholm. We're going to chat for the next 17 minutes or so. We'd love to open the floor to a few questions as well about the important work that you're doing at UNICEF. The important, well, you tell us. I mean, we had a wonderful chat already backstage, and you're doing so many amazing things and also pretty challenging things. So we'd love to hear.
Thank you so much, Jos. I'm afraid the introduction set us for a more exciting topic. So I'm going to win you back by talking about all the exciting things that UNICEF is doing. UNICEF, among all the UN agencies, has a very broad mandate. We are involved in health education, humanitarian assistance, water and sanitation, climate change, and so on. So all of that can be supported by AI, and we are investing heavily in AI initiatives across 190 countries. So we have a venture fund that supports startups with support country initiatives, for example, in supporting health workers and providing early warning systems for natural disasters and estimating wealth inequality at the very micro, regional, or local level. But more importantly, and probably closer to the topic of future of AI, we are supporting capacity building. We are supporting young people and supporting children in getting digital skills and, more importantly, the environment in which they can develop those skills so that they can profit. And by profit, I don't mean just money, right? I mean they can thrive in the future that we all, I'm assuming every attendee in this audience, is involved in some capacity in AI development that we are building for them.
So we are talking now about the development of an exponential technology which already has a massive impact on education. It has a massive impact on the quote-unquote jobs we can expect in the future. So let's talk a little bit about that digital divide. Can you tell us, in the eyes of UNICEF and the work that you're doing at UNICEF, what that means to you?
Digital divide is probably one of the biggest problems that we see among all the other socioeconomic issues that AI is amplifying on a massive scale, right? We see inequality existing in the world, and AI is the type of technology that can take that existing inequality and make it massive. Digital divide that we see can be technological. Most AI development is concentrated in the developed countries, more specifically in the Silicon Valley. So when it kind of translates to other contexts or other countries, it is usually sold for lots of money, but the value is extracted from other countries. The data are collected from countries all over the world, and sometimes those data are collected not in very transparent ways when data workers are employed to label those data, they are not paid properly. We have read about digital sweatshops, I guess, in the news. So that digital divide of haves and have-nots is only growing. So what can we do about it? First of all, we obviously can make sure that the regulations are in place, national regulations and international regulations for AI. But also for us, for our companies that we work for, how can we trace the data provenance? How can we trace the human rights impact across the life cycle and, more importantly, the value chain of AI development? That's a huge topic, and I don't have all the answers, but I would love everybody in the audience to start thinking about what is your impact on the digital divide and on human rights all over the world.
So I do think that that's really interesting because it's very hard to imagine sometimes what the UNICEF does or what the different bodies of the United Nations do. And unless you've worked at the UN or you understand how it works with the governments and the country offices, it's hard to picture practically what UNICEF is doing. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the digital best practices that you've written, which I understand Scotland is the first country to have adopted these into their overall AI policy. What does that mean, and how do you get to such a document?
Oh, wow.
We're going deep on our Thursday afternoon.
First of all, I would like to thank the previous presenter for demonstrating a list of international recommendations on the ethics of AI. There was the OECD principles, there was wonderful ethical recommendations from UNESCO, which is also a UN agency which is doing a lot on AI. UNICEF has developed policy guidance on AI for children, and that was 2 years ago. It was a massive success. We have involved lots of governments and had a lot of stakeholders participating and showing enormous interest. Why we have focused on children? Well, first of all, of course, it's our mandate, so I'm usually the person in the back of the room raising my hand and saying, have you thought about how your algorithm would affect children? Why? Because children quite often cannot give legal consent, for example, for data collection. And if their parents give consent for them, those children may be pretty unhappy when they grow up. How do you deal with that? Children may not realize what is or is not real when they interact with human-like systems, right? So it's pretty difficult to explain to a child that chatbot is not real if you haven't explained to them that Santa Claus is not real yet. So all those principles start with do no harm. Please think about the consequences. And it's a very rational decision. It has nothing with emotions. You don't have to like children to implement that. But do no harm. Don't be a bad person that is destroying the world or destroying humans. And there are other principles, and they very much aligned with the rest of the principles, such as UNESCO's one. It's about sustainability. It's about providing ethical background for each and every decision that you make. It's obviously about fairness and non-discrimination, but more importantly, children are our next generation. They are your next generation of workers. They are your next generation of consumers. So if you mistreat them today, tomorrow they will hate your company, they will hate your business. I've had quite a few chats at this summit over the coffee breaks, and we all agree that ethical AI, responsible AI, is not just lip service, right? It's about making good business decisions. If you build ethical algorithms, it makes your business more resilient, more sustainable, and ultimately more profitable. It's just good business sense.
So now I want to ask just a really practical question, right? So we work in education, we use AI, we work in schools, and our ethos as a small business is indeed to be super ethical, to keep in mind the rights of the child, coming from a nonprofit background, 100%. However, that puts us in a very difficult position against some of the bigger companies who might have less need to maintain the same type of ethical standards or can move faster, absolutely have more access to capital. So let's get real. If we're talking about the rights of the child on one hand, but then many players being able to circumvent, like we just heard in another panel, Snapchat just having an experimental bot, right? Which is a pretty big deal. So how are we going to collectively actually do something about that?
Wow.
Sorry.
You're asking tough questions for the end of the summit. Again, I don't have a clear-cut answer, not because I don't have answers, but because the answers that I have mean a lot of work for everybody involved. It means a lot of work to develop national and international regulations, regulations for data, regulations for human rights in AI. It means a lot of work for every business to develop those responsible business practices. It also means a lot of work for all of us to raise our expectations for what we expect from big businesses, right? Expectations like, if you do your business unethically, I'm not going to buy your products. Snapchat is a very interesting example because their chatbot has been shown to be pretty harmful to children. It's a platform that targets children as their main audience and unfortunately is unable to prevent the chatbot from recommending children at the age of 9 and 12, in the examples that I have seen, to go and have sex with adults who probably are much older than those children, right? So who is taking responsibility for that? Who is taking social responsibility? What are your audit processes and how do you mitigate those consequences? I would love to see Snapchat not only advertising how great their chatbot is, or not only Snapchat, other companies as well, but also putting in place a proper mitigation strategy. If something happens, how do you mitigate harm? How do you repair what happened? How do you kind of mitigate the consequences to the point where discrimination doesn't happen again, but also you repair the harm that has been already done? It's a difficult question.
I'd love to focus a little bit on the tools that different countries and different companies can use. UNESCO is UNICEF's partner organization at the UN, and they released guidelines on AI in education. What about the tools that you're creating? How can the people in this audience, for example, leverage some of those tools?
Oh, I'm going to go back to one of your former agencies. UNDP has developed a wonderful capacity assessment on AI, which most companies can use to assess where are they in the, like we have heard in the previous answer, right? The change management, it takes a lot of time. If you're just starting your AI journey, you need to know the roadmap where you're going, but you already also need to assess where you are. UNDP has done that work. UNESCO is developing guidelines and helping countries to build their capacity. For companies and businesses, especially small businesses, you need to focus on building diverse teams, right? You need to focus on attracting the talent that is not only the best in terms of education and skills, but also can bring diverse experiences to the table, so you don't miss on discriminatory outputs. You don't miss on algorithms that do something that they should not do. You collect data in ethical ways. All of that is absolutely in the guidelines, but again, for every company, because we are very different in, again, scale, industries we work in, I would recommend start by developing your own internal ethical guidelines and your own roadmap for AI development if you are serious about it. And please make sure that human rights are at the center of that roadmap.
Thank you. So for those of you who might have missed it, that's UNDP, United Nations Development Program. Thank you. That's an awesome reference. That's very good. I was going to ask you one more really tricky question, but you know what? Literally, it slipped my mind. So I'm going to have the audience work with me on a very tough question for Irina. Are there any questions in the audience today? This is a topic that really does affect us all, so I'm super curious what you have for us. Wonderful.
Hi, you said something about educating children and that it's very hard for them to oversee the consequences. But how about the parents? We're already addicted to our phones and all unethical apps. Don't we need to educate the parents first before we start educating the children?
It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. I think we need to educate everyone. As we've seen with climate change, it's entirely possible that children will be the first ones to actually raise their hand and say, no, 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 we should not be doing this, and be very proactive about advocating for a change, for ethical practices, for sustainable practices. It's entirely possible that young people of today, and we see this in UNICEF's engagement with young people, they're very proactive in building open source AI, in ensuring that it's transparent and ethical throughout the life cycle. It's entirely possible that the new generation of young people who are born in the digital world, who are not afraid of smartphones as a new technology that needs adoption. No, they're born with it, so they pick it up and go. But they will be more aware of the risks that come with that. So if we start educating them by giving them not only the skills but also awareness of the risks, they may be the change makers. I see this happening in many countries, and it's really great.
I secretly have remembered my tough question for Irina, but I definitely want to honor the audience. If there's any other questions, I can ask it later anyway. Should I go for it then in the last minute? Yeah, I see someone. Okay, my only question for you is, are there any children that are helping you design policies for children?
Yes.
Yes, excellent.
100%. So again, youth engagement is at the core of everything that UNICEF does, and actually one of the principles in our policy guidance on AI for children is if you're developing anything for children, you have to engage them. You have to check that it makes sense for them and their opinion is valued in the design, development, implementation of whatever you're doing. But it's also about again, if we are designing educational programs rather than algorithms, we still need to engage them in designing what it is. And advocacy. If we can engage children in advocating for the better world, I think we all will be better off.
Wonderful. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Irina. Thank you.